Danny, it's my pleasure to present our Eagle Leadership Award to you, Danny Vargas, for your outstanding contribution and leadership for our nation and our community. Here you go.
Wow. After an introduction like that, I can't wait to hear what I'm going to say. I want to thank Mickey and the Latino Leaders Network for this incredibly humbling honor. It truly is very humbling. I want to thank all of you for being here this evening. I want to thank George P. Bush for joining us as well. If you don't mind, I'd like to take a moment to thank my family, briefly, beginning with my mom, whom we lost in 2016, who was able to raise 4 kids as a single mom despite having an incredibly challenging and difficult life. My mom was born in Puerto Rico to an incredibly poor family. They were so poor that they gave her away to a slightly better off family to work as a servant girl. That family never let her go to school. She never went to the first month of the first grade. She never learned to read or write. Ended up moving to New York, lived in New York for like 60 years and learned maybe a dozen words of English. She knew how to say, hello, how are you? Get the heck out of my way. That was the extent of it. But she was the strongest woman I ever knew. She was the one that taught me that when they tell you to sit down and shut up, that's when you need to stand your tallest and be your strongest, especially if you're standing up for somebody else. She taught me that it's okay to break some dishes and ruffle some feathers if you're trying to do something good for somebody else. I also want to thank my sisters growing up. I was youngest of 4 kids, 3 older sisters. That's a whole other story. But especially my oldest sister, Iris, who, when I was 16 or so, she stepped into my life and grabbed me by the scruff of the neck and shook me real hard and put me back on the right track. I want to thank my 2 sons, Daniel and David, the 2 greatest sons that Dad could ever hope for. I want to thank my wife, Arlene, who's been putting up with me for the last 34 years. I want to thank God, without whose intervention I would not be here today. Those of you that know me know that I often say that statistically I ought to be dead or in jail right now. Somebody who grew up like me, a Puerto Rican kid from the slums of Brooklyn, from back in the bad old days, who grew up in a broken home on welfare, sometimes homeless, often hungry. Usually a story that begins that way doesn't end too well. But I was able to join the Air Force at 17. Not only as a way to get out of that environment, but as a way to be able to give back to my country, as a way to be able to serve. Because I knew even then instinctively that despite the circumstances that I grew up in, I was incredibly blessed and fortunate to be born in the one country in the world where the outcome may not be guaranteed, but the opportunity is. And I kept that spirit of giving back alive throughout the rest of my life. After my service in the military, after 5 years as a government contractor, after a career as an executive in some of the world's biggest telecom and technology companies, after starting my company, Varcom Solutions, 20 years ago, I've been able to stay involved in those areas and issues that I care about deeply and where I'm passionate. Everything from workforce development to economic development, from transportation to immigration, from civil rights to healthcare to public safety. And I've been able to stay involved in these areas because I care so much about helping our struggling neighbors get the help that they need to be able to achieve the dignity of sustainable self-sufficiency, and to make sure that I could help lead the effort to create a new national museum on the National Mall for a segment of the population that is woefully under-recognized and underappreciated. You know, when I was chairman of the Friends of the National Museum of American Latino, it was a time of bitter division in our country. But we were able to create a national, bipartisan, unifying, positive, patriotic coalition to get a bill passed in Congress for a more complete and accurate telling of American history, to illuminate the American story for the benefit of everybody. And we were able to get that done after 26 years of trying. After years of people telling us to just give up, it's a lost cause, it's never going to happen. We were able to get the authorization bill passed in Congress in December of 2020, on my birthday, December 21st. And we're able to show the nation not only what could be done, but how to get it done. And now the Smithsonian is going about the business of planning for this museum, but the work is not yet done. We still need Congress to act to remove a restriction on the National Mall for building new buildings, so that we can house this important institution in America's backyard where it belongs. So that visitors to our nation's capital can easily see the stories of our community's contributions to the building, the shaping, defending of this nation from the very beginning, including serving in every war we've ever had. And that's one of the reasons that I created the American Latino Veterans Association, ALVA, to be able to not only help the 1.5 Latino veterans in this country today thrive, but also to recognize their indispensable contributions. So we focus on 5 key areas: workforce development and job placement, entrepreneurship, information on resources and benefits, advocacy, and yes, telling those stories of Latino contributions to our military history throughout the entire history of the United States, from Spanish General Bernardo de Galvez and over 10,000 troops that helped stem the advance of the British from the South, coming from Central America and the Caribbean and the New World, so allowing General Washington to win the War of Independence, to the first full admiral in the United States Navy during the Civil War, David Farragut, who famously uttered those immortal words, "Damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead," to the 200,000 Latino troops in World War I, to the 500,000 Latino troops who fought in World War II. To the Korean conflict, where we saw the exploits of the U.S. Army's 65th Infantry Regiment, the Borinquerillos of Puerto Rico, setting the gold standard for the bravery of a combat unit. To the thousands of Hispanic surnames left on the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Wall, to the young Latinas and Latinos who have served and sacrificed on our behalf in the battlefields of Afghanistan and Iraq, to the 60-plus Hispanic Medal of Honor recipients, to the 25% of the Marine Corps today. As an Air Force veteran, I can tell you Latinos take a backseat to no one in the defense of liberty. Now, while I fully recognize that we're here in Milwaukee during a partisan political event, I'd like to speak for a moment about something a bit deeper, and that's the soul of our nation. I remember when I was the national chairman of the Republican National Hispanic Assembly back during the 2008 presidential campaign for John McCain. I was at a fundraiser at a home in the Las Vegas area, and I was giving a speech, typical talking points of a campaign. And in the middle of that speech, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a little girl. She was maybe 6 years old. And I had an epiphany. I had a realization that this was so much more. It wasn't just about a campaign. It wasn't about a candidate. It wasn't even about an election. This really was about her. And it was about all of the other kids. And it was about all the future generations and what kind of country we would be leaving them. Look, as an Air Force veteran, I fully recognize that we are the most powerful nation on planet Earth. We've got the most powerful military that the world has ever seen. There's not a single external force that can take us down. The only thing that can take us down is our own internal division. And the level of division and tribalism and polarization that we're seeing in our country today is unsustainable, and it's a threat to our national stability. So I'm just going to ask you in closing to go beyond politics, if you would. And if we could take a look at ourselves, if we can look at ourselves in the mirror every day and ask ourselves if we're doing everything that we can to make our nation stronger and freer and more prosperous, if we're doing everything that we can to make our society more fair, more equal, and more just, and if we're encouraging and modeling more peace, love, unity, kindness, and civility, because we can all be doing more. We can all be doing more to serve our country, to serve our communities, and to serve our neighbors, because we are all children of God. Which reminds me of one of my favorite Bible verses from Galatians 6:9 that says, "Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will all reap a harvest if we do not give up." Thank you all so very much, and God bless you.